Good evening, our Legion of Doom. I fucked that up immediately.
You did?
Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm, where social awkward outcasts, crazy riddles, and all around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the nerdy occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Good evening, everyone.
And I am your host / Timeline Wannabe, the brainstorm of pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am doing mostly okay.
Oh, hello, Melinda. Good to see you.
It's been a minute.
Yeah. So yeah, no intro, just for time purposes, because we're kind of full stack here. I hope everyone had a nice Valentine's Day, either with someone or just enjoyed a nice day. Either way,
Hope you treated yourself to something one way or the other.
yeah, I worked. I also went to I also went to movies, so not a bad day.
Although one of those movies was Captain America 4, so I'm not sure how enjoyable that was or is.
We can review it next month when we're back to kind of normal
Yep.
stuff.
For those that don't know, when holidays come around, we do theme months, and February being the Valentine's Day month, we do Valentine's Day related shit. Because for some ungodly reason, every motherfucker, every ideologue in the freaking shop wants to stick a flag into holidays and lay claim to them for their particular ideology. And so every time we come in and we go, knock that off. You can't claim this holiday as territory in your freaking ideological jihad. God damn it!
Right.
But they still try.
All right. Well, hello, Giant Turtle. Good to see you. Uh, Matt is better than bad, so yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, again, so kind of a full. Uh, okay, let me get the first article up.
Yep.
All right, so this is originally, obviously, I'm using an archive version, but this was originally from the Durham.ac.uk, like Durham University. The problem with Valentine's Day, published February 10th, 2023. Why we didn't see it then, I have no idea.
Because Google changes its algorithm and that shuffles around articles for some reason.
Right.
You'd think they would just go, which are people most clicking on, or which happened most recently, but that's not how Google's algorithm works. So the algorithm God giveth and the algorithm God taketh away.
Right. Anyway. Oh wait, sorry, I forgot to read who. Does it say who did this one? Uh, no, no, it does not.
Oh dear. A unclaimed article. This could either be a very, very
Oh,
good sign or a very, very bad sign. There are
well, I
no.
don't think it's. It doesn't look like. Uh, okay, okay. In one of two articles in this year's Valentine's Day series, Dr. Natalie Goodison tracks the origins of the holiday. Okay, I guess Dr. Natalie Goodison then.
Is who we are interacting with for the sake of this polemic.
Yeah.
On we move. How about you, Dr. Goodison?
Right. Okay. Valentine's Day fills me with a slight dread each year, rather than my heart being filled with amorous desire or gratitude for all the love that fills my life. I tend to lump it with yet another thing to put on my to-do list, get cards or dinner. Perhaps it's the commercialization, the sense of obligation. Perhaps it's the sense of being slightly resentful that my diary is dedicated by consumerism. As a historian of ideas, I frequently wonder how did we get here? Who was responsible for Valentine's Day? A short-sighted answer to my question is Hallmark. Hallmark began to sell Valentine postcards in 1910, but in the same vein of postcards' popularity, soon moved to the greeting card in 1912. By 1915, Hallmark had printed and distributed its own Valentine's cards. Ever the cynic, I have a hard time not attributing Valentine's to a calculated endeavor to soften the post-Christmas slump. Even if this is true, Hallmark has certainly been successful. From Cupids to Valentine's in school to the pressure of romantic dinners to chocolate and the greeting card, Valentine's Day is now firmly rooted in our cultural calendar.
Okay, but here's the problem with all of that analysis. As per usual, you are acting as though the mechanisms of capitalism are some kind of autonomous demon that nefariously shackles people to things. And that is not how capitalism works. It perceives a hole in a market. Those who wish to fill that hole in that market try to fill it, and the products rise or fall based on their ability to serve that market. Non-corporate greeting cards or Valentine cards were a thing all the way back in the Victorian era, and it had ebbed and flowed several more times before that. So the only thing capitalism is guilty of, TM, or the only thing Hallmark is guilty of, TM, is successfully filling the market that was there to be filled. Like, you do realize capitalism doesn't create desires, right? It finds desires to exploit, and then it exploits them. And the actual roots of Valentine's Day go back to before the birth of Christ and shit. So there's only so much you can blame capitalism for in this particular case. As per usual, all it really did was see that people wanted a thing, tried to give people that thing in exchange for money, and the market was born thereby. Oh, how dare they, apparently, according to most academics. Moving on.
Right. Okay. Okay. However, the idea of St. Valentine's Day as a day of amorous desire predates Hallmark. To find the connection, as a medievalist, I start with St. Valentine as a saint and consulted the stories of saints' lives. When I was an undergraduate and hell-bent on my tour of Europe, I even visited the church where St. Valentine's head was kept in Rome. At least I saw a skull with some horrible flowers draped over it. The tour guide told me that St. Valentine was said to have performed marriages for young Christians, something that was forbidden by the emperor of the day. Now slightly older and more dubious, I turned to medieval accounts of the story for proof of this story. Sometimes described as the most read book of the Middle Ages, the Golden Legend, circa 1225, is the main database of saints' lives populated throughout the Middle Ages and beyond. But the story of St. Valentine in the Golden Legend does not have any data relating to love or marriage and state. St. Valentine in this story refuses to sacrifice to idols, is imprisoned, but manages to heal the sight of an official's daughter, converting many, but incurring the wrath of the emperor who beheads him, the usual death of a saint. This is St. Valentine of Rome.
And by the way, 4 idols in this case read polytheistic pagan deities. I understand that Dr. Goodison here is a medievalist, and therefore she has that medieval analytic bias, but let's not pretend like this holiday doesn't have pagan roots that not only transcend multiple cultures, but also predates Christianity by several thousand years. Just, doing that thing where I provide the other half of the story when someone provides only the first half of it. Moving on.
Okay. But to add to further complications, there's yet another prominent Saint Valentine, this time of Tourney. This Valentine, according to Acta Sanctorum, was a bishop. His reputation reached to a scholar named Crato, whose son had been crippled since he was 3. Valentine agrees to come and effect a cure on condition that Crato convert to Christianity. Valentine cures the boy and not only converts Crato, but his household and multitude of others, including the local prefect. Upon hearing of this cure, the Roman senators demand that Valentine pray to their gods, and Valentine, refusing to do so, is beheaded.
And again, all of this is so much fluff when you consider that, with or without a historical Saint Valentine, this is yet another case of the newly converted Romans trying to find a reason to maintain some connection with pre-established polytheistic traditions and co-opting thereof. But more to the point and more theologically interestingly here, there's actually a third Valentine, quote unquote. That would be the Bishop Valentinius, and he is significant because not only is he said to have lived several centuries before the other two are alleged to have lived, but he was also a Gnostic Christian, not an Orthodox Christian, because in the early days of the church, whosoever got to call themselves Christian was actually still up for grabs. There's an entire school of Gnosticism referred to as the Valentinian school because he was its main proponent of this particular denomination. Honestly, knowing what I know about Gnosticism, I'm kind of sad that Gnosticism didn't win the culture war on that front, but I'm an outsider looking in here, so I suppose I will leave that up to people more theologically invested in Christianity than me. Moving on.
All right. The two Valentines are remarkably similar, and while their cults were popular throughout Europe, it is frequently difficult to distinguish one from another, or in fact with any other clerical Valentine, as the name seemed to have some popularity. What is intriguing about these stories is that none of them associate Valentine with courtly love. The statements of St. Valentine conducting secret marriages seems unsupported by medieval data.
And again, I will once more point out here that while this particular scholar seems to have a specialization in things medieval, and therefore that's probably why she stops there, it is worth noting that this tradition goes back much farther than the medieval period, but moving on. Assuming Brainstormer.
Sorry, I was grabbing a drink real quick.
All right, no problem.
So where do we get this association with Saint Valentine more? Well, one short answer is Chaucer, sometimes heralded as the father of English literature. In Chaucer's Parliament of Fowls, the birds gather in a meeting or parliament to choose their mate. And what date should they gather on? But Saint Valentine's Day. For this was on Saint Valentine's Day, when even fowl cometh there to chase his mate. For this was on St. Valentine's Day, when every fowl comes to choose his mate. In fact, Chaucer makes a startling direct invocation that birds come on St. Valentine's Day to choose their partner. The final reference reads, St. Valentine, that are full lofty on high, thus small fowls sing for thy sake, now welcome summer.
And this too may actually have pre-Christian origins, and Chaucer might just be adapting those pre-Christian origins. Interestingly, Chaucer might also be mocking the church a little bit, as Chaucer was frequently wont to do, because he didn't exactly have the rosiest view of the clergy, as anyone who's read even parts of the Canterbury Tales can tell you. He wasn't a particular fan of the church proper. Moving on.
Great. Giant Turtle Dawn, just a little reminder, people choose the religion they believe in, and even when things like hobbies, people choose what they like. Nobody is going to root for theirs to not win unless it's the correct. Things go shit when they are mainstream idea, and even then, what isn't mainstream is a minority and thus targeted by the majority, with any guarantees it won't be ruined, so not exactly a safe choice either.
I still maintain that pluralism and objective truth is the correct answer to all of these. It doesn't matter your ideological bias, it matters what's actually true. And hopefully, at least a large percentage of people believe what they believe because they think it's true, not because it's culturally convenient or culturally potent or whatever the fuck. As one of the reasons why atheists that call themselves cultural Christians really butter my metaphorical biscuit, because it's just like, if you de facto don't believe that these things are true, why would you base a moral system on them? That's almost like tethering your moral system to something you don't acknowledge is true. It's a very risky maneuver. Moving on. Yes, Dragon Turtle, you in fact can. Pluralism, it makes perfect sense. And
Hey, guys,
not to be a dick here, but all it takes for pluralism to be viable is for everyone to acknowledge they have a small piece of a larger truth, which is fairly easy for anyone who's intellectually honest. Moving on.
Right. Okay. If in Chaucer we have the mention that birds sing for Saint Valentine and choose their spouse on his day. Thus, we have a common connection between Saint Valentine and courtly love, here disguised as birds. One question that scholars discuss is the exact date of the Saint Valentine celebration. Is it in fact on Saint Valentine's feast day? Is it on St. Valentine's feast day on February 14th? Do birds really choose their mates this early in the year when it still feels to be dead of midwinter? Several answers appear. One argument is that according to traditional medieval calendars, spring began when the appearance of Pisces, which occurred on February 15th. Other traditional calendars regard February as the first month of spring. Even a medieval calendar in Durham states that birds begin to sing on 12th of February.
DT, that's your pessimism bias showing, sir. One person looks at partial incomplete truths and says, so they're all true. The other person looks at a partial or incomplete truth saying they're all false. Actually, technically, both of these statements can be true depending on the perspective of the person viewing it. It's the
Hey guys.
glass half full versus half empty thing again.
Okay, not to be the dick here, but we got there are like 3 other articles. I'm sure they're longer than this one because we're almost done with this.
Yeah. Okay. So moving forward.
Look, guys, look, you two are you two are intellectuals, a lot smarter than me, and I'm sure you guys have had conversations like this, like elsewhere.
We have, and we will probably continue to. Although I don't think I or Dragon Turtle would be all that secure in the being smarter than you part there.
I'm fairly certain. But yeah, no, it's just like again, it's just for time's sake, and because we got like another week of this, or what, 2?
Today is the 15th.
Yeah.
Which means tomorrow will be the 16th through the 23rd, I do believe. So yeah, we have 2 more weeks, I think.
Actually, 1 for Saturday.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Next Saturday will be the 23rd, and then we'll have 1 more after
22nd.
that.
No, 22nd. And
22nd? Okay.
yeah, 22nd, and then after that is the 1st of March.
Yeah.
So we just have one.
Which will also be our 6-year anniversary.
But yeah, it's just again for time purposes because we only have like 20 hours every month. So yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, moving forward.
Damn it, where was I? Okay, yeah. I don't know. Do you want me to reread that paragraph I was going over?
Sure.
Okay. One question that scholars discuss is the exact date of the St. Valentine celebration. Is it in fact on St. Valentine's feast day on February 14th? Do birds really choose their mates this early in the year when it still feels to be dead midwinter? Several answers appear. One argument is that according to traditional medieval calendars, spring began with the appearance of Pisces, which occurred on 15th of February. Other traditional calendars regard February as the first month of spring. Even a medieval calendar in Durham states that birds begin to sing on 12th of February. I must say that this year, by 6th of February, I have noticed a longer daylight, begun to hear bird song in the early morning, and witnessed blackbirds quarreling in a hedge possibly over their choice of mate.
And I am not going to take any position on this because that is up to the respective queens of fairy to determine amongst themselves, and I am neither going to insult either queen. So there.
Okay. I got nothing to say to that either. It's just stats, and it's just statistics. Motherfuck.
Yeah. Moving forward.
I don't know if that's a stutter or I just legitimately my brain just cannot pronounce the words sometimes.
There's always the why not both question.
However, another suggestion is that the Valentine's Day referred to by Chaucer is a certain bishop of Genoa, whose feast day was held on 2nd of May. It is possible Chaucer knew of this. Genoa's bishop, and the Valentine's Day refers to, is in fact in the month of May, which seems a more temperate month for the pairing off of lovers and birds. In courtly literature, May is the month of love. I was not aware of
That
that.
that seems more plausible from where I'm standing. But here again, we have the issue of during the early modern period and early medieval periods, Valentine or Valentinius was a rather common name, and there are at least four relevant Valentines who it could be referring to. It's kind of like how there are two Saint Cyprians, technically, one who is Cyprian of Carthage, the other who is Cyprian of Antioch, and they often get conflated because people got confused as to which Saint Cyprian they were referring to. Shit happens. It's kind of like how in the modern day there are like 500 people whose first name is John, and in a time before last names, I imagine that got very, very confusing. Moving forward.
Right. Okay. Chaucer then is one. Chaucer then is one of the largest pieces of evidence that links St. Valentine with courtly love. However, Chaucer was not alone among his contemporaries to do so. In fact, John Gower, Auton de grandson, and possibly the Valentinian Pardo all make references to Valentine's Day and courtly love. Thus, Chaucer's reference to St. Valentine is one among others by his contemporaries in the late 14th century, demonstrating the cultural association of St. Valentine with mate choosing.
It's it's also worth noting that the reason courtly love is called courtly love is because it became immensely popular in the literature of the Middle Ages. It was literally the romances of court. The very idea of romance literature is a medieval concept. And a lot of very cynical people try to say that therefore the modern definition of love or romance is a medieval or post-medieval fabrication. I will, however, point out that if you look at the classical period, similar sentiments of love still exist, even if arranged marriages were more common for political reasons. And no, I'm not using political there in the everything is political sense. I mean, literally, marriage was a political tool at one point in the classical period. Moving on.
All right. Whether Chaucer alone is responsible for this suggestion and others copied him is less certain. What is interesting is that writers such as Chaucer and Gower, who were deeply interested in the concept of courtly love, make much of St. Valentine's Day. They seem either one, to reflect a notion that was popular in medieval society of St. Valentine's association with courtly lovers, or two, they are in fact responsible for propagating the connection themselves. Thus, courtly medieval literature has an important part to play with St. Valentine and his romantic associations.
I think here we have a chicken and egg situation going on, although it's not quite a direct chicken and egg situation because there's a third component here, namely the fact that the entire reason why St. Valentine's feast day is where it is at all is to coincide with two things. Primarily, the Veneralia, or the festival of Venus, and the Lupercalia, which was frequently a festival of love. It was sometimes also referred to as the festival of the wolf moon, hence Lupercalia, lupus being wolf, essentially. And cue dragon, turtle, dog, supremacist ideologies now. Moving on.
Alright, that was the end of that article.
Yep.
Wow, half hour.
Yep, moving forward.
Okay. So this is from inthesetimes.com. This Valentine's Day, let's look to Marxists to reimagine love, romance, and sex. Written by Sarah Jaffe. Published February 13th, 2023.
No, I don't think I will be looking to Marxists for that, on the basis that you shouldn't look to any assorted version of neo-Hegelians for anything. Neo-Hegelianism and Hegelianism ruin everything they touch, without fail, and usually wind up with a body count in the several thousand at a minimum. Moving on.
Alright, subheader is, it's not you, it's capitalism. I feel like that's just a lie you would tell yourself because you don't want to improve yourself for others, but okay.
Uh-huh. The I deserve everything, people around me deserve to just give me things impulse, as is so very common among especially upper middle class Marxists. And let's be honest here, the majority of Marxists are upper middle class Marxists, just like the majority of all Hegelians and neo-Hegelians are upper middle class intellectual twats with their own feet up their asses. Hence the Hegelianism destroys everything it touches aspect.
I mean, to be fair, I'm the complete opposite. I don't think I deserve anything.
Which I occasionally want to slap you upside the head for being so dull on yourself for, because if you don't deserve love, my friend, then nobody does, and that's too dismal for me to contemplate.
Not what I was referencing, but okay. Don knows the truth in his heart, but chooses to deny it and live in feline sin.
I knew the dog supremacy was gonna come sooner or later. And yes, I shall commit the Felonian heresy. Well,
All right.
A World War II historian and a socialist had a whole video on how most of the socialists were trust fund needs basic. Yeah, that it doesn't surprise me, because frankly, only those who are academically out of touch enough to believe in Hegel's revisionist thesis and antithesis dichotomy bullshit could become ideologies associated with Hegelianism and neo-Hegelianism. The only other major person at fault here is Rousseau, because you basically got the Rousseau Frenchman, and you've got the Hegelian and neo-Hegelian Germans, and together they create every bad thing created in the 20th century. Moving on.
All right. Italian communist Antonio Gramsci. Okay. I'm always confused if the C sounds like a K or not. You know, it's like.
In this case, it sounds like an SH. Gramsci.
Okay. God. Anyway, Italian communist Antonio Gramsci has been quoted quite a lot in recent years amid our various political catastrophes, from Trump to COVID-19 to climate collapse and the political center's seeming inability to resist any of the above.
Holy fuck, that was a sentence. we literally got this person espousing the virtues of Gramsci and then blaming everything they don't like politically on people's quote-unquote resistance to unilateral Gramsciiteness. That's, those of us who are terminally online occasionally do need to touch grass and become aware that quite a lot of people aren't as thoroughly familiar with political theory as those of us who are terminally online. But this person literally is the meme, is the Gramsci did nothing wrong, re-Trump and COVID meme. And it still, even though I know that there must in fact be many people like this, it's still unusual to come across one, even on the internet. Moving on.
Alright. The most famous line from his prison notebooks, written between 1929 and 1935 while a political prisoner of the Mussolini regime, is probably the crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, thank you, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. This is sometimes more loosely translated as, the world is dying and the new cannot be born. Now is the time of monsters.
So, in other words, in order to see your political utopia come to fruition, you would rather burn everything that makes society function to the ground and build something in the void in the absence thereof. I'm gonna borrow Dragon Turtle phrasing here. Holy political brain rot, Batman. Moving on.
Alright, it's certainly fitting to think of what Gramsci was writing from a fascist prison in today's political climate, but it's also true that we're in another sort of interregnum, one of romance, sexuality, and gender itself. And this one comes with its very own set of morbid symptoms, as anyone who's tried dating lately can attest. Dating apps are a plague. Every week there seems to be a new term for bad behavior: ghosting, breadcrumbing, whatever. Work demands more and more of our time, leaving less and less for love. And a constantly destabilized economy leaves us anxious and stressed, even if we do happen to have stable work.
I hate to burst this. Actually, no, I can't even complete that sentence because I love bursting this particular bubble. The ideologies of Antonio Gramsci are only ever going to make economic instability ever more severe and stark, my dear. You are taking a poison and expecting it to function as a cure. You are doing the ideological equivalent of fucking homeopathy right now. You are taking the iocane not in hopes that you will build up a resistance to the iocane, but because you think iocane is the cure for all ails and is a panacea, apparently. Holy hell, this person's mind is scary to a Lovecraftian degree. I feel like I'm staring into a Lovecraftian abyss. And given like Warhammer style Slaaneshi cultism, it's entirely possible. Moving on.
Abortion is now legal in a huge chunk of the country, and homophobic and transphobic violence, not to mention actual bans on trans healthcare and drag, are on the rise. And even if you do make it to coupledom and want to have children, our country still has precisely no support for working parents. The material basis on which you might have thought you'd be able to build a life is crumbling.
And again, the ideologies that you seem besotted with will do nothing but magnify the cracks in this particular foundation. Also, because I am a gay person, I am going to rebuke and revoke your human shield that you just tried to deploy there. Do not attempt to speak on my behalf. The power of individualism compels that collectivist demon the fuck out of you. Moving on.
Alright. If there's one thing we can learn from Marxists in this moment, it's that material circumstances matter, even when it comes to romance. Gramsci wasn't exactly sitting in his prison cell dishing out relationship advice. He was trying to analyze the world that had locked him up, the capitalist system he was trying to bring down, and its effects on human life. But in Americanism and Fordism, one of the many pieces collected in the most commonly published English translation of those prison notebooks, he did turn his gaze to sexuality and relationships in order to explain how those relationships were created and coerced by industrial capitalism.
Okay, and now we come to the part where I'm just going to have to unravel your entire pseudo-historical nonsense, which is, 1. Gramsci was not imprisoned by capitalists. He went to university under the reign of capitalists, but because he was a misguided socialist brat, his revolutionary sympathies led to both radical communism and radical fascism, because whether you like to admit it or not, fascism was an attempt to refine and purify socialism. It was not an attempt to counteract it, and it certainly had no sympathies whatsoever with capitalism. One of Mussolini's main complaints about socialism as it existed prior to him was that it was not pure enough and would be diluted and watered down by capitalism, which is something you can only believe if you're coming at it from a further left point of view. Like, I don't want to be one of the memes or anything, but unironically, in many ways, fascism is more left-wing than communism. He and Giovanni Gentile's main complaints were essentially that communists were doing communism wrong and that communism needed to be fixed.
Moving on, or
Yep, moving on.
sorry. Enter Allah said, I let the best die, kill it if you have to, and Kemal is unburdened by what has been fascism, at least in the 20th century. It's just Marxist socialism, but nationalist rather than globalist.
Yeah, the apparently unforgivable crime for which Antifa types like to decry fascism is that fascism, at the very least, and this is the only good thing I can say for it, had borders. And even then, only some of the time did that become true, because as we know, while National Socialist German, the German variant of National Socialism, at least ostensibly had borders, Hitler was also rather fond of the idea that all of Europe could be Germany if he tried hard enough. It didn't work out that way, and so much the better, but that was at least in the theory. But even the Nazis still had some leeway for the concept of borders, because oddly enough, Hitler didn't want to colonize much of Asia. He was more than happy to save that area for the, at that point, German or Japanese Empire, which is kind of hilarious to me, actually. But yeah, for all of his many, many, many stupid ideas, Hitler had actually a lot of respect for Hinduism, Buddhism, and like Eastern mysticism in general, which, is one of those apparently European people you don't like can get the gas, but all of those Asians are just fine, I suppose. Moving on.
All right. In this, he built The Origin of the Family, Private Property in the State, published half a century earlier by Marx's best friend, editor, and frequent co-author, Frederick Engels. Engels had a rather unconventional romantic life himself, rather outwardly maintaining his bourgeois lifestyle. He never married and instead secretly cohabitated with his working-class lover, Mary Burns, an Irish radical who deeply influenced his work, and after Mary died, with her sister Lizzie. In this book, he built on notes left by Marx and attempted to write a historical materialist critique on the Victorian family, an ultra-patriarchal household designed to consolidate and hand down wealth and police women's behavior, or in other words, a more tightly controlled version of the nuclear family we still have.
In other words, they made up a bunch of shit post hoc, as Hegel originally did, because the entire Hegelian dialectic of history is basically just post hoc shipping everything into two different categories and act like those two categories result in everything. But in response to your thing about Hitler's respect for the Asians might have been because they're so far away, DT, there is actually a deeper philosophical reasoning behind Hitler's respect for the Asian cultures and so on, which is that he was heavily influenced by the ideas of a Russian occultist by the name of Helena Blavatsky, who quasi-historically conjectured a bunch of mystical bullshit in relation to European history, which of course then Hitler and in particular Himmler took and did the whole, blood power thing with it. So, as much as it pains me, at least some of Hitler's more crazy out there beliefs have to do with him misinterpreting a bunch of Victorian occultists. So, yeah, that very rarely, if ever, is a fun thing to have to admit, because yes, while the majority of Hitler's economic and political beliefs are Hegel's fault, quite a lot of his revisionist history and quasi-mythological beliefs are the fault of an admitted misinterpretation of Helena Blavatsky. I don't think that entirely makes her to blame, but there is at least a world where some of these Nazis' more zany ideas wouldn't have existed without Helena Blavatsky.
Moving on,
Yeah, moving on. Sorry.
all right. All right. Sorry, Zernsel said, the respect may have faded once they stopped being so far away. For a second, I thought the author was about to go full Marx X Engels ship. Lol. It doesn't make her to blame any more than Nietzsche. Is it Nietzsche or Nietzsche?
Nietzsche.
Alright. Is to blame for, if I recall correctly, his sister, but at least someone twisting his work.
Yeah, the Ubermensch issue, yeah, that it's a very similar scenario with what happened with, I believe, Helena Blavatsky's books, The Secret Doctrines and The Secret Doctrine and the Mystery of Isis. Those were two quasi-historical volumes of occult literature she produced around that time, and it was a heavy influence on Heinrich Himmler, who then in turn would be a massive influence on Hitler. And I'm gonna get shit for this on the internet, but I don't care because it's historically accurate. In many ways, Hitler was just Himmler's fall guy. They literally found him in a bar after World War One and saw that if they gave him speech training and shit, he would be a good patsy and a good front man for their movement. So while it is internet wise unpopular, it is also historically accurate to say that in many ways Hitler was just the fall guy. He was the patsy, he was the pawn. Whether he realized this or not is a different question, but in many ways Hitler was just the mascot of the Nazi Party. Moving on.
Okay, with both Gramsci and Engels point out, the latter at considerable length, is that the family form they had been raised to think of as normal was, in fact, a recent invention created with some degree of coercion and molded into common sense, a term Gramsci used for the kinds of popular beliefs that shape our world even when they're wrong. He counterposed it to the good sense, more accurate understanding of the forces at play in the world. Heterosexuality, as it existed in both men's lifetimes, was a particular construct of industrial capitalism, designed to suit the needs of factory employers rather than make people happy. A wife at home to do the cooking, cleaning, and carrying sent workers off to the factory better rested and ready for another day of work. Such reproductive labor, the wages for housework movement decades later would note, makes husbands' work possible.
Okay. Like all insidious lies, there is a fraction of a kernel of truth here, which is that the nuclear family, as we would recognize it today, is actually a fairly recent historical innovation. In most of human history, it was not uncommon to see the extended family also living in the household, just like it wasn't uncommon to see the household being a much larger and more complex endeavor with servants and so on, because, and here's where the kernel of truth ends and the lie begins, the nuclear family wasn't some dastardly patriarchal plot to oppress the women's derp. It was a organic outcome of the fact that in a pre-industrial society, the primary economic unit is the household, which actually gave women a tremendous amount of informal, indirect, and therefore unaccountable power, because the man was in charge of industry outside the home, the woman was in charge of industry inside the home, and prior to industrialization, the majority of all of the material wealth produced was produced, manufactured, and distributed in the home. Moving on.
Alright, a century's worth of Marxist feminists have built this understanding into theories of housework, caring labor, emotional labor, and much more. They were often part of social movements demanding radical changes to the law to accommodate vastly different understandings of love, marriage, and gender, aware that the ways we are allowed to be and build lives together have a real effect on our material well-being. And in turn, our material well-being has a lot to do with how good our relationships, romantic or otherwise, are able to be. In this, I think there's something to be gleaned from these two writers that might help us navigate this moment and imagine a better framework for love than the one that's been handed down to us from patriarchs past.
Okay, there are a couple things drastically wrong with that sentence, but I don't have time or inclination to go through them all, so I would just pick the two most annoying and pressing, and then we're going to move on. One, the sentiment of emotional labor implies that it is a burden to care about someone else. In particular, in the way that emotional labor is usually used by intersectional feminists and the like, especially the Marxist adjacent ones, it is an implication in which according to this theory, women shouldn't be asked to give a shit about men. And I bring this up because it is an admission that, especially for out of touch upper class women, they would rather not have to expend the labor and effort of giving a shit about men. And I forget what my secondary point was going to be, unfortunately. But the long and short of it is the very idea that emotional labor as a concept in gender studies theory took off is an admission that at least the women to whom this applies consider caring about men to be a burdensome form of labor rather than, I don't know, giving a shit about the rest of the human race or something. And as a men's rights advocate, I find that remarkably telling. Moving on.
All right. The reason I returned to Ingalls and Gramsci this Valentine's Day is that while this holiday is, like the nuclear family, a construct of a particular kind of capitalism, it is a time of year where romance is inescapable, and yet many of us wind up feeling like we're doing it wrong. In this moment, with more options for what shape relationships might take than ever before, with fewer and fewer people opting for the nuclear family form, especially among the working class, there's still plenty of social pressure to be coupled. Just look at the increasingly frantic genre of romance reality TV. A friend of mine referred to England's Love Island as heterosexuality gulag, and he's not wrong.
Okay, and again, I will speak as our particular representative of gay because I can. A lot of gay men like monogamy and pair bonding too, because we like I think most people, most humans, like the idea that they will find someone eventually who will complete all their they will account for all their weaknesses and be complementably strong where the other party is weak. We like the idea, in other words, of finding our better half. And that is not something unique to heterosexuality or modern day romance. It seems to be at least some version of a human default, evolutionarily speaking. Because broadly speaking, for all the time that humans or human-like higher apes have existed, there have been, broadly speaking, two models. One, the pair bonding model, which is the one in which people couple, or two, the tournament model, where only the most valuable genetic specimens couple, and the most valuable genetic specimen has a harem of all of the males and or females, depending on which way the tournament model is spinning. And maybe I'm an old-fashioned romantic here, but even as a gay guy, I would rather live in a situation where I only had to get my romantic, interpersonal, intimate belonging from one person. Mostly because I would feel like an utter failure if I had 1,000 suitors to choose from and couldn't be asked to settle down with any of them. Like, there are people who can make open relationships work and polyamory work and just there are people who can make thruples, quadruples, etc. work, but they are a vanishingly small minority if they exist at all. And there's a part of me that wonders if that's not if that's not ultimately going to end up being a return to something resembling the tournament model, because dating apps certainly seem to be trending in a tournament model direction more so than they are in any way an egalitarian or free love direction. Moving on.
All right. Okay. Yeah, he said a lot of stuff. I didn't see that. Okay. Okay. Notice how they say to imagine, not to work out. How it would actually function or stress test it. Just visualize, get hooked, and force it to happen. And am I crazy that these people honestly sound like how what Pose, a demon from Pact, was doing, inverting natural order to destroy things? They just seem to want to invert everything, like Desaad in the French Revolution, who just said, well, all our values need to be flipped now where evil is good and good is evil. These people hate exclusivity. Exclusivity. They would be and have been against the idea of friendship because it leaves people outside of the friendship, to the point leftist teachers have for rate. I'm gonna assume he meant forbid it.
Forbade, probably.
Yeah.
And yes, GT, you are at least onto something. This is where we get down to my idea of legislating the void, because they think that if they can just burn down all the existing power structures until everything is a null proposition, they then get to dictate what gets built in that void. One wonders how in the fuck they think they would in any way be rational or correct to do so when their entire premise is that the very idea of rationality is a harmful delusionary social construct. But yeah, they want to burn everything to the ground so that they can build a whole new existence from the ground, or indeed from the void of ether up, seemingly. And it seems to me that a lot of these people dislike the idea of like couples or pair bonding because they don't like the idea of having to be satisfied with just one partner. They want to be able to essentially treat romance like a buffet rather than a meal. And they wonder why in the fuck anyone else would even want to be satisfied with one partner. Which to me is frustrating. Because sure, there's something superficially appealing with the idea that I could like snap my fingers and enslave all the hot guys to my will. But that would get very boring very quickly, and I would feel very empty inside, because unlike what these people seem to want, as Bette Midler put it, love isn't supposed to be a endless aching hungry need. In theory, it's supposed to be something that something can grow out of. And yes, that was foreshadowing for later. Shush. Moving on.
Alright. While I wouldn't recommend reading Ingalls for a perfect, accurate history of the development of the modern family, what he does do is connect the couple form and the gender roles to developments in the economy. In other words, the form of couple we're told is a natural way to experience love, actually developed in order to consolidate wealth and evolved alongside the institution of private property. For a modern day brilliant expansion on this topic, I recommend Melinda Cooper.
My God, she actually, I was almost ready to give this person some credit for acknowledging that Engels and by extension all the other historical revisionist neo-Hegelians are unreliable when it comes to history. And yet, even while admitting that Engels is unreliable, the rest of her paragraph was basically, I know this is false, but I'm gonna believe it anyway. And also, no, pair bonding is not a historical abnormality. If anything, humans behaving in tournament models or harem models is the historical abnormality, since it only happened in like early barter hunter-gathering societies where something resembling tournament models were still in force, or harem models, depending. While both tournament models and pair bonding models are common in various times and places throughout history, it does actually appear that the tournament or harem model is the historical aberration, at least for human beings. And the and the pair bonding or coupledom model seems to be the norm. So if we're looking for something like human beings under less than ideal circumstances for our species, I would put it to you that the kind of tribal or authoritarian or backwater scenarios where you do or can have tournament models and harems seems to be the unorthodox or abnormal proposition, and the pair bonding or coupling model seems to be the norm. So you simultaneously admitted that Engels was wrong about pretty much everything, and yet said basically, but I'm gonna believe him anyway, because something patriarchy. That takes a special kind of brain rot, man. To know that something is wrong and choose to believe it anyway. That is straight up Delulu, my darling. Moving on.
All right. Engels drew upon anthropological research among the Haudenosaunee Iroquois in England, in North America, to note how the Victorian family was but one of many options, and that the modern family had, as it were, undergone an enclosure consolidating control in the hands of a patriarch. The origin of monogamy, he writes, had very little to do with sexual love of the individual in the modern sense. Indeed, most men had no intention of staying faithful, only of keeping their wives so. Monogamy was in no way the highest form of love, but rather a form of antagonism. After all, if it was simply a matter of evolution, Engels jokes, then the palm belongs to the tapeworm that carries a complete male and female sexual apparatus in each of its 500 to 200 sections, and passes its whole lifetime in fertilizing itself in every one of its sections.
Okay, listen, you bewilderingly ahistorical cunts. There are two very important things I would like to point out to you here. One, there is a reason why you can only find something resembling tournament models in tribal or highly, oppressive structures, like the Iroquois or the Muslim world. And that is because, much like you can only find private property not existing in barter-related societies, it appears to be a natural and organic development of human civilization that when numbers are small enough to be feasible and resources are plentiful enough to not require ownership, we will develop the concept of ownership. So too, you might occasionally be able to point to a tribal society that makes something resembling the tournament or harem model work, but only tribal societies will do that, because in order to become the more advanced society we are, you need to abandon the one-to-one barter system eventually, and you need to abandon the tournament model eventually to develop what we would actually refer to as civilization. And two, holy hell, is that a noble savage argument? That's the only way you can look at this and say, well, clearly the way complex Western societies run is unnatural because look at these tribal societies. Would it occur? Does it occur to any of y'all who claim to be all about material conditions, the relative material squalor that these tribes exist in? And I'm not saying that they have nothing to contribute to society or to the human spirit or to whatever. I am very glad that all the various native tribes that exist still exist. But at the same time, I am also very glad that humanity became capable of complex societies and moved away from tribal ones. Because when you're not high on noble savage bullshit, you remember that unfortunately, reducing things down to the primal, like, animistic tribe sense also involves tribalism. And the only reason you can choose not to believe that is because you are both historically and geographically separate from the way tribal societies work, which is whatever James Cameron might want to blow up your ass, tribal societies are not a picnic, and they're certainly not uniformly harmonious to the spirit of the earth, derp. The Native American tribes, all of them, or very nearly all of them, had been butchering each other for thousands of years before any European white person ever set foot on this continent. That's why they're separate tribes to be begin with. And again, no, I'm not pulling the mirror molecule of your delusion, which is the tribes were all barbaric and demonic and derp. I'm not doing the mirror opposite of your noble savage bullshit. I'm just pointing out that your noble savage bullshit can go fuck itself. And any person of these nationalities or these minorities who does think that their society was all about singing Kumbaya and never having any conflict with the other tribes is very, very delusional. And the more sane among the tribesmen acknowledge that Native Americans were killing each other long before any white man got here. Moving on.
Alright, General, I don't even think defining it as a tournament models is correct. If you look at most of these societies, they are developed with a high mortality and often a lot of violence. Thus easy to conclude that, yeah, a man can have 4 wives and 3 out of 4 men will die in war duels. Avatar does make sense, but only because there is apparently a planetary superintelligence commanding Na'vi and outright able to control the other life forms directly.
Even then, James Cameron does a lot of, or rather lets the noble savage motif do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to world building. Because if you knock out the load-bearing linchpin that is noble savage mythology, you realize that Avatar basically does almost no world building for the Na'vi. Or at least it's been 2 movies, soon to be 3, and we haven't seen much in the way of hard and fast world building. Moving on.
Rather than being natural, Ingalls argued, monogamy was formed based on economic conditions, the need to pass down property. This meant that the working classes actually had a better opportunity to find real love, in his view, because they had no property to pass down. So naturally, in order to keep the working classes in order, they had to be brought into this form of the family. Enter Henry Ford and Gramsci's take on him.
Okay, here's the problem with your theory. Or rather, one of the many multifarious problems with your theory. One, we can see monogamous or pseudo-monogamous mating behavior in other species on this planet. We know, at least to the broadest of broad strokes degrees, that evolutionary psychology does very often favor pair bonding when it comes to mating. And 2, again, look at the societies you are trying to hold up as the humanity running as it should model, and then look at the societies which you're claiming are oppressive and abnormal. And you will notice that very often, the societies you claim to be all natural are still in the tribal and or animistic phase. And again, I'm not saying that these tribes don't have their own cultures or nothing to contribute to the human spirit or any of that shit. Again, I'm not doing the opposite of noble savage, which would be demonizing the savage. But let's also not look at history or ethnicity, for that matter, through rose-colored glasses. If the kind of tribes to which you are referring were left alone to create civilization, civilization would have taken a longer time to get going, because certain advancements make logical and evolutionary sense for our species. And it is worth noting that most of the European nations have more advanced and more complex and more resource rich, and therefore a higher quality of life than the natives would have had the European colonizers never shown up. Doesn't mean we never did anything wrong, doesn't mean that Europe isn't somewhat to blame for the way some shit went down, but I would like to remind you that we're talking broadly about the same sorts of cultures that used to rip out people's hearts for spiritual and ritualistic reasons. And again, I'm a polytheist with a lot of sympathies to animism, so I'm about as sympathetic to this point of view as you're going to get. And even I can acknowledge that even while acknowledging that polytheism and animism both hold a lot more water than most people think they do, that doesn't mean that humans aren't buttholes to each other every great now and again. And we were very often in the tribal / animistic phase of our culture's development.
Giant Turtle, that isn't even a good argument, even though it should be. Some of these guys are wacky enough to blame humans for the cruelty and violence of the natural world, as if humans have taught them carnivorism or territorialism.
Yes, I am aware, but I can only deal with so many layers of crazy at one time. Unless this particular person actually pulls the nature is only evil or nature is only destructive because it's reacting to humans card, I'm going to leave that card out of the deck for now. Mostly because I can only stare into the abyss so long before going crazy myself. Moving on.
Okay. Might be important to mention that they take longer, mostly due to certain circumstances. European cultures and stuff were just as barbaric, and they would have came to something similar enough to us eventually.
Yeah, eventually the same forces that make pair bonding a more viable mass, civilization builder than the tournament model would have occurred. In fact, they probably did, and that's how we got here. This is the thing. In order for any of these neo-Hegelian or pseudo-neo-Hegelian ideologies to make sense, you have to insert a degree of both malice and intentionality to the building of civilization, rather than humans developing civilization in much the same way as every other species on this planet develops its mating behavior or its social behavior, which is the shit that works tends to have good results, and those good results rather speak for themselves, so much so that we can, as a species, frequently self-delude ourselves into assuming that things work by completely different causal mechanisms than they actually do work on. Vis-a-vis the feminist model, wherein apparently they believe no woman ever benefited from monogamy or from mating or from marriage or any of that, even though let's use an example. Extremely rich Muslim dude has 4 wives who are varying degrees of homemaker. As a result of this, and I realize I'm oversimplifying, as a result of this, one man's resources are being used for the upkeep of 4 women who don't contribute similar resources. Not saying that therefore Muslim society is a picnic or anything, but I am saying that to claim that marriage was only a dastardly patriarchal plot by men to oppress the women's is to ignore all the ways in which women would have and do benefit from men's resources, protection, and labor, etc. And again, I'm not saying that therefore we should just, let every culture do whatever it's going to do, but if you claim that history is uniquely oppressive to women, I'm going to then point out to you all the ways in which women benefited from history, and also probably the ways in which quite a lot of men didn't benefit from history. Because history, frankly, is a complex system which both benefited and hindered a lot of people throughout history. History was not a picnic for anybody, or at least not unilaterally. Moving on.
All right. Gramsci, like Engels, found sex a worthwhile subject of inquiry and was particularly interested in the attempts to control and harness its power. It was not just Puritanism, he wrote, that made Ford so interested in the sex lives of his workers that he sent inspectors into their homes to make sure they were properly heterosexually coupled. Increasingly rationalized, tailorized factory work required, Gramsci wrote, a rigorous discipline of the sexual instincts and regulation of stability of sexual relations. Ford was willing to pay higher wages, but had to ensure that the workers wouldn't spend their extra money on booze and women. Rather, the implication seemed they should be putting that money into property that they could pass down through their families.
In other words, Ford was interested in making his labor force productive, so much so that he actually overextended and tripled himself, as he did with Fortlandia, etc. But here's the thing. Don't sit here and tell me that the inheritors of neo-Hegelianism weren't similarly interested in micromanaging their populace, because this very article is an indication that they very much were. Also, I would like to point out that the factories of the 19th century no longer exist in the modern world, at least not in the modern Western world. China and India are a whole other kettle of fish that we will get around to eventually. But in the modern Western world, the kinds of factories to which Marxist principles might have been at least tertiarily relevant no longer exist. This is the problem of wanting to keep so many elements of Marxism in modern day critical theory and social justice oriented paradigms. The factories to which Marx was referring no longer meaningfully exist in the same way as they used to, unless you really want to redefine and reinterpret a bunch of shit that wouldn't have applied to, or that it wouldn't have applied to. Excuse me. In which case, that is invariably what Marxists do. But the unfettered, unvarnished capitalism where the worker was meaningfully oppressed, to which Marx was actually referring, the sweatshop or the spinster line or the grinding mill, etc., where child labor and everything existed, that world no longer exists in the Western world. Again, China and India are what they are, but let's keep it within the purview of the actual West in the first place, not only because it's the part of our society that's actually relevant to anyone who would be reading this, but also because so many of these ideologues blame the third world problems on the West, because something Western imperialism. So if you're going to blame the West for the stuff going on in China and India, then I'm going to have to insist that you actually examine the West to get data for this, which is to say that in the modern day Western world, the factories of Marxist imagining no longer exist, and so much the better. Good riddance to all of it. But Yeah, unless you want to reframe and recontextualize a bunch of shit, you cannot use the Marxist definition of factory work to be synonymous to the modern day working class. Moving on.
Alright, your internal, these people talk like humans were just vibing in peace, joy, and abundance, while some primordially evil humans tricked them into rigging systems for power, which is weird because they all the time talk about how being a bad person is something society and the environment inflict on someone rather than something inherent, except when the race and sex stuff comes into play, but that's usually more hypocrisy to support a base than anything. I think them making Gunner video games was the first time in memory I remember the leftists actually attacking China.
Well, it's similar to how they swear up and down that anyone who has any metaphysical suppositions or beliefs over or above historical materialism are delusional morons, all the while their entire enterprise is founded upon metaphysical suppositions because their abstracted definitions of materialism don't actually apply in the materialism of reality. And when you try to point out to them ways in which reality doesn't operate by their rules, they will default to their metaphysical suppositions, all the while saying that religion and metaphysics are the opium of the masses and we should abolish all of it a la Vosh. In other words, my metaphysics good and sacrosanct and reliable, your metaphysics is something that I will go out of my way to take away from you. Cunts. Cunts all the way down. Sometimes literally cunts. All the way down. Moving on.
Alright, we should probably note at this juncture that Gramsci had a rather prudish take on these issues. It wasn't entirely disapproving of Ford's methods. Certainly, he, unlike Engels, did not write glowingly of the need to liberate love from the demands of industrial capital. But he too was clear the new industrialism was monogamy, because the exaltation of passion cannot be reconciled with the timed movements of productive motions connected with the most perfected automatism.
We know for a fact that the Greeks, Romans, Sumerians, and Babylonians were all monogamous. In order for this supposition to be true, this would have had to have started happening as soon as something resembling modern capitalism started to happen. In reality, it well predates capitalism as we would understand it, or as anyone would define it, because, again, there are more and older factors at play than the demon you call capitalism. Moving on.
Alright. We should probably. Oh, sorry, I heard that. For the working classes, both Engels and Gramsci stressed freedom is only the freedom to sell their time for a wage. Freedom when it comes to relationships and marriage follows the same logic. Civil law, Engels wrote, might hold that marriage is a free contract between men and women, but the reality is as unequal as the relationship between a worker and her employer. Sorry.
Okay, and now we've landed on one of my particular bugbears, which is the demonization of transactions, full stop. Here's the thing. As I see it, there are only two options. There is transactionalism, as it's actually supposed to work, where someone gives something, someone takes something and gives something in return, or a unilateral system where one person is given everything unilaterally and not expected to reciprocate in any meaningful way. And I point this out because, especially in the vector of feminism, it always seems to manifest as proper manhood or proper love or proper relationships involve a man giving a woman everything he has and then some, and doing so for altruistic reasons and expecting nothing in return. And yet you're not allowed to look at this situation of things of men unilaterally sacrificing themselves on the altar of women and women giving them nothing but contempt in return. And you're not allowed to point out, hey, the man is getting obviously fleeced here. And therein lies the problem with most anti-transaction lines of thinking. Anti-transactionalism sounds nice in a world of post-scarcity or like Star Trek Federation levels of manufacturing technology, but in a world with a finite number of resources, any anti-transactionalist perspective essentially boils down to someone getting a bunch of shit for free and someone giving a bunch of shit for free and not taking anything in return because transactions are evil, don't you know? Do you not see how that's more dehumanizing and oppressive than a balanced transaction where one person gives something the other wants and takes something that they want in return? And I'm not doing this. We're defining transactionalism as its failure. Shit. We're not defining transactionalism as a miser rigging the system and taking everything and being a bad agent in the transaction. For every bad miserly transaction, there are dozens of positive balanced transactions that are so beneficial that you often don't even think of them consciously. Hence why it's possible to pull this transactionalism is evil, everyone should get what they want for free trick. Moving on.
Alright. This still holds up today. Women still make less money, and during the pandemic, we saw large numbers of women leaving the workforce due to carrying responsibilities. And the hashtag #MeToo movement reminds us of the unequal threat faced by women who might want to have relationships, romantic or otherwise, with men. Common sense says we're all equal now. Good sense includes the realities of still existing power relations.
Okay, here is a problem with intersectional feminism, especially in the era of hashtag #MeToo. Just because women feel or fear being taken advantage of does not mean they actually are. Because those feelings and fears can be aroused erroneously. And also, just because men tend to have the stiff upper lip TM and don't like to complain doesn't mean they don't have anything to complain about. Because here's what often happens. A man is in a situation that actively screws him over, but his stoicism prevents him from complaining. Meanwhile, a woman is in a privileged state of affairs, but because she erroneously feels and fears, she feels more victimized than her male counterpart, not because there's a material reality on the other side of that fear, but because men are simply less predisposed to complaining. And while we're on the topic of hashtag #MeToo and who exactly it disadvantages and who exactly it advantages, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. And yes, I'm pulling the men's rights card because I do that sometimes. And god damn it, this side of the story is important to tell sometimes. There have been cases where a man who's being abused by his female significant other calls the police on her, and then when those policemen arrive, they kick him to the fucking ground and beat the shit out of him. Let me say that again, just to be entirely clear. There are many cases on record where a male abuse victim calls the police on his female significant other, and he is the one the police detain. Not to mention the bias in the family courts where default mother custody happens so often that you basically have to be Amber Heard to get that revoked. Not to mention the idea that no-fault divorce very often is rigged in the inversion of the man, because the idea that a woman is a victim by default and a man is a perpetrator by default, again, happens unless a woman makes an Amber Heard of herself. That is about as far a woman has to go before the courts get wise to her and go, okay, this bitch is clearly toxic, we need to give custody to the man, etc. And there are so many other men's rights issues at play in which a man is disadvantaged in a romantic relationship with a woman. Frankly, I woke up 4 hours earlier than I was supposed to today, and so I'm too tired to go through all of them. But my point is, if you want to act like women are still victimized in the era of #MeToo, when a man can look at a woman wrong and be perma-canceled, you can fuck right off. I'm not saying that everything is rosy for women too, or that there are no other areas in which women's interests need to be taken into consideration. My supposition is that they frequently already are being taken into account, and almost no one, including most men, bother taking men's side of the story into account, ever, even in the most severe of circumstances. Even in a case as clear-cut as a Johnny Depp versus an Amber Heard, there are still rad femmes out there who, even given all the evidence that we as a nation saw in front of our very eyes, there were still, after the Johnny Depp Amber Heard verdict, people who sided with Amber Heard and against Johnny Depp, because they believed that strongly in the men have no problems, women have all the problems, and men are always the perpetrator, women are always the victim mentality. Fuck right off, please. Moving on.
The solution, wrote Engels, and echoed by generations of liberal and radical feminists after him, is to remove the economic considerations that now force women to submit to the customary disloyalty of men, and you will place women on equal footing with men. Of course, what he meant was full communism, but he was also interested in a more unconventional intercourse of the sexes, and the end of what we now call slut shaming.
I'm just gonna throw this. I'm gonna throw this out there. Men get virgin shamed every bit as much as women do, and very often men get slut shamed every bit as much as women do. Those few men who can actually become male sluts. Here's the main difference. Women can be sluts with just about anyone because people unilaterally desire women quite often. And it's a lot easier to convince someone to bang a woman than it is to bang a man. Hence, the ratio of men who can be male sluts is a lot smaller than the ratio of women who have slutdom as an option. But even though the ratio of men who can be male sluts is a lot smaller than the ratio of women who have the option of being female sluts, you still get terms like womanizer thrown around. You still get terms like serial date rapist, etc. You still get situations where men's overt access to sexuality is a problem, especially in the era which is post-Me Too. If there was ever a pretense of men who act like sluts getting away with their slutdom, that era died the very second #MeToo took off. And so much the better, because a lot of those people who were victims of Me Too deserved to be victims of Me Too. But for every one Epstein or Weinstein, there were dozens of innocent men who were equivocated to rapists because they were awkward, or they looked at a woman wrong, or they consensually engaged in sex with a woman, and then she got mad and retroactively retracted consent because he didn't call her the next day, or she wasn't happy that it was a one-night stand, or he was a celebrity and she felt entitled to his attention, etc. Moving on.
It's worth noting that these relations are not described along a gender binary because that's what people recognized in Engel's time. But rather, these relations are what created our ideas of men and women in the first place. Material circumstances led to dividing people along purportedly biological lines in order to control reproduction and built an entire mountain of common sense about gender on top of that seemingly simple division.
And your premise appears to be that women never benefited from their unique gender role, or that men always benefited from theirs. Your premise seems to be that the prospect of the yes dear syndrome, i.e. the man who takes his orders from a woman, is a modern invention. And it ain't so. For most of human history, only the landowning gentry had anything relating to political autonomy. And very often, in the age where only the landed gentry had access to political autonomy, a man wasn't making decisions for himself, primarily. He was making choices for his entire household. And don't you dare tell me that no woman ever Lady Macbethed him, or, to use the more modern parlance, Hillary Clinton'd his ass. I.e., I'm not saying it happened all the time, but let's not act like it never happened, that a woman told her husband which way she wanted him to vote, or he wasn't eating that night, or he was sleeping on the couch, or some equivalent thereof. Let's not act like women never had the ability to whisper in their hubby's ear and get what they want. Because I guarantee you, the impulse of yes, dear, anything you say, dear, is not a modern invention at all. For the women's is probably the oldest war cry in human history. Moving on.
All right. I am thinking we should call it for this one. We'll finish it next week.
Yep.
All right, give me 1 sec. Fuck, I'm tired.
Yep, me too. Like I said, I woke up 4 hours earlier than I normally do, and it's kind of fucking with my brain. Which is also why I've been a little bit shorter on these rants than I probably could have realistically been. Like I said, I had like 3 other rants I wanted to go on, but my brain just crapped out. The last bit.
I've been up since 5 a.m. today.
I woke up at 1, having gone to bed at 5, so I'm running on fumes at this point.
You just have a lot of it. You need to work on that sleep schedule, man.
In this particular case, it wasn't my fault. Mr. E wanted to. We couldn't stream on Wednesday, so he wanted to do it on Saturday, and then he wanted to do it at 1 in the afternoon, which is like 4 hours before I normally wake up. And then I looked at my clock, and it was 5 in the morning, and I was like, shit, I'm gonna have to set an alarm for noon so that I can actually be awake at 1. Anyway, moving forward.
Alright. Valentine's Day, Satan's Last Laugh, Our Meaningful Holiday, written by Kelly Dodson, published February 14th, 2017.
Yeah, and if the title didn't give it away, this is one of the theocratic Bible thumping ones.
Yeah.
As opposed to the feminist ones.
I refrained from being, and this was from medium.com, obviously, where we did the Star Wars article that took us, about a year to finish?
I think more than that. I think it might have been closer to like 1 year and 6 months.
Year and a half, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I know we have I say we finish this one and then we move on to the last thing. Just keep the two. Yeah. I don't know why I'm so fucking tired.
Yeah, my head is in the swimming phase too, so I'm probably gonna be going to bed at like midnight tonight.
All right. I refrained from being a real asshole on Facebook this morning. I wanted to repost an article I saw from the History Channel about the actual origins of this mid-February day. Most popular reported this day was constructed to honor St. Valentine, a priest. St. Valentine was beaten to death for marrying couples in secret because the rule of Emperor Claudius II, who forbade single men to marry because he basically needed them as familyless soldiers in 3rd century Rome. Now, does that make you want to eat candy and hump, or what?
And again, there are at least 4 major historical Valentines or Valentiniuses, which might have gotten conglomerated into St. Valentine. Which one is weighted more than the others, I couldn't tell you. And it'll probably be a long time before historians get anything conclusive on that front. Moving on.
All right. I refrained from being a real. Oh, sorry. I'm tired, but ever conscious of avoiding my own hypocrisy. I did not want to tarnish someone else's day / situation / holiday. I don't want to be the reason your floofy, fluffy, flowery chocolate day has hit the skids. One might say abstaining from that, but writing this is a contradictory. However, after repeatedly having eyes rolled at me for not getting my pom-poms out of stores to cheer on Team Puppy Love, I felt writing this would help release the poison. Wow.
I am going to hold you to that standard of hypocrisy even more than I normally do, because you explicitly stated that avoiding hypocrisy is one of your goals. And so, my brother in Christ, I shall help you do that thing by mercilessly mocking you and beating the intellectual shit out of you as and when it is necessary. Moving on.
Okay. Valentine's Day for many is legitimately tough. Single people who want love feel more alone, discouraged, and hopeless on this day. Maybe next to Christmas and New Year's Eve. Those holidays are equally hellacious. Don't you worry. A couple of people who don't get a Valentine feel they are unimportant to their partner, and even the majority of couples who make efforts on this day are mostly doing it out of obligation. I mean, all the restaurants aren't usually filled to max capacity midweek, so forced romance is my very favorite kind of romance. # sarcasm.
I mean, we got lucky this year because Valentine's Day was on a Friday, which is a much more convenient day for people to do excessive, expensive romantic shit. That being said, I can relate to all of those motivations for feeling kind of meh on Valentine's Day. It is occasionally not fun. But here's the thing. I don't then try to take out a metaphorical pound of flesh from Valentine's Day's ass. Because when I have a problem, I'm capable of, at least some of the time, acknowledging when that problem is of my own making. And the reason why we care about not being alone on special days like Christmas, New Year's, and Valentine's Day is because we hope to not be alone on those days, which isn't a bad thing. In order to demonize Valentine's Day, you essentially have to demonize the desire for romance altogether, or you have to avoid the acknowledgement that people who have high standards for holidays have those high standards for a goddamn reason. Namely, these days are special, and we therefore want them to be special. And so when our realities fall short of those expectations, we feel kind of bleh about it. But the correct answer is dust yourself off and try again next year with all the more gusto for the sake of it. It is not try to ruin everybody else's day and tear down the holiday. Moving on.
All right. Allow me to dive into my own feelings and share the rawness of why this day is particularly rough for me. Despite my being a half self-sufficient, independent person, I want love as much as the next girl, and because I am not codependent, willing to settle, or harassed enough by life to exchange who I am for an engagement ring, it is a little harder for me to find a mate.
Oh, goody. It's a theocratic Bible-thumping woman. And my god, sometimes traditionalist bitches can be almost as gynocentric as the feminist ones. So this is going to be very, very fun.
I said her name. I thought I told you she was okay.
I may not have processed it when you said the name. Sorry. I'm very tired. I'm running on 5 hours of sleep basically.
Okay, big deal. I've done that, and I've done that for days before. So,
which is not healthy, by the way. I have to say, as your friend.
I have a wonderful family and wonderful friends, but they just don't take the place of a romantic partner. I don't have someone to call home to and cook for, vent about my day with, kiss and snuggle, or even bicker with over which show is more binge-worthy or why they put an empty milk carton back in the fridge. No one does this. No one does that. I don't do that.
I've never done it either. I don't know why people would do that. I guess because people get kind of in the rut of the milk goes back in the fridge and then forget to check whether there's actual milk stuff still left in it. Maybe. But yes, you have my sympathies for not having those things in your life. I too, at the moment, don't really have that in my life. Hopefully someday I can fix that, but today is not that day. Moving on.
Couple of people take those things for granted and see those of us who are bummy about their seemingly in this state of solitude, particularly on Valentine's Day, as overreactive brats who just need to make the day great anyway. A mind over matter type of thing. I saw something yesterday which stated we should just get over it because people without moms or dads make it through Mother's and Father's Day. Evidently, I just need to suck it up. But what?
Okay, that feels like one hell of a straw man you're building there. Yes, you should try to look on the bright side and don't. And here's the thing: take responsibility for your own particulars, please. You can't blame Valentine's Day for the way you're feeling. You should acknowledge that you feel bad and then get on the metaphorical horse and try again. Or if not, at least stop blaming external factors for something that is very particular to you. I suspect what actually happened is someone told you in no uncertain terms to take responsibility for your own freaking emotions instead of taking it out on those external to you. but that's where your brain concocted the straw man. But in short, yes, Valentine's Day is not to blame for how you feel on Valentine's Day. You are at least somewhat to blame, or at least capable of exercising some agency over your feelings, or failing that, at least be willing to take responsibility for yourself instead of claiming to be the victim of external circumstances. Moving on.
All right. Uh, oh, but you know what? You can suck it. Why do you get over the need to shame and shit on others? How about them apples, eh?
You're about to shame and shit on Valentine's Day. Just pointing that out. Like, people telling you to take responsibility for your emotions might actually be trying to help you instead of shame you, my dear. Those don't, like, just because someone is telling you to take responsibility for something, that's not shaming you. That's just an acknowledgement that you have the power over your own life, ultimately. Like, instead of blaming other people or indeed holidays for your problems, perhaps you should look into the mirror and self-assess, question mark? Moving on.
Alright, some may call me bitter. I'm not bitter. There is no chip on my shoulder, and I do not begrudge love for the or those who have it. Every failed love of mine has taught me invaluable lessons, all of which I would never trade. So let me reiterate: I'm not bitter. I'm worried. There's a difference.
You accused people who were telling you to take responsibility for your emotions instead of projecting it outward. You accuse those people of shunning and shaming you. That's not the actions of a non-chipped on shouldered person. Like, like this is one of the situations where the bard says it best: the lady doth protest too much. If you are internalizing people's attempt to excuse Valentine's Day from your ire as them shaming you, that's once again on you, my dear. No one shamed you. They were reminding you that your emotions are to some extent in your own purview to shape. Or if not, at least you should take responsibility for them instead of making it everyone and everything else's problem. Moving on.
Alright, let me be frank. My soul physically hurts today. There is a pang in my chest and tightness around my heart. I have cried on and off today and in front of people, which is something I never usually allow. I just can't seem to keep the emotion from bubbling up and out. Some of that sadness I understand, and some of it I don't. My heart's a mess.
And for that, you have my sympathies, darling. I have been there. I have done that, and I have bought the other form of clothing than t-shirt because fuck t-shirts. But, um, but nevertheless, as someone who frequently has spent days in and around Valentine's Day spiraling in the no one is ever going to love me and I'm going to die alone and unloved spiral, when I get that way, I do not try to smash Valentine's Day or Christmas or New Year's or any of the other days in which that line of thinking rears its ugly head. Because my internal thoughts and feelings and emotions are to some extent my responsibility, if not to control, at least to contain. It's kind of like how if you were a non-Christian or a non-Westerner walking through an airport around Christmas time, you don't get to take a fucking Zippo lighter to the airport Christmas tree. That's kind of the equivalent of what you're doing. It's I hurt, and therefore I'm going to take it out on Valentine's Day for that. That's essentially what you've just done here. And no, the correct answer is it hurts to hurt, but it's not anyone or anything else's problem but mine. Again, if you can't control, you can at least contain. Moving on.
Alright, people are wishing me a chipper happy Valentine's Day, and I want to punch them in the face.
Okay, that is an acknowledgement that you have people in your life who actively wish you joy, and you can't bring yourself to do anything other than resent them for wishing you joy. And I don't want to play Oppression Olympics or Victimhood Olympics here, but go ahead and ask an incel if they get so lucky to be told Happy Valentine's Day or Merry Christmas or any other given holiday on the holidays. Or if they're told on those days just as much as any other day that they are defective humans and that they should be ashamed of themselves for being defective humans. Like, you at least have people in your life who would wish you a happy Valentine's Day, and trite but true, you don't know what you have till it's gone. There are people who don't even have that. There are people who, in fact, people wish death upon on a regular basis. And they at least have it worse than you, and you should at least be grateful for whatsoever goodness happens to be in your life. Where you can. Moving on.
I know they mean well. I tell myself to force a smile and be an adult about it, despite their words stinging me like literary acid. I'm
Okay, what you know what you should
Hold
you know
on.
what you should sorry. Go ahead.
I'm fairly miserable at faking pleasantries, so I just avoid eye contact. I guess my mask today is a rather rude one, but at least it prevents me from screaming.
Okay, I'm gonna have to side with your internal monologue on this one. You should be an adult. You should be grateful for the good things in your life, in this case the people who want you to experience joy even when you don't. And yes, you should also be self-aware enough to realize that some of the problem lies with you, not with the day on which people are wishing you joy that you wish they didn't wish you. And again, I want to point out how much of a luxury belief or a luxury approach to beliefs it is to whine about people wishing you joy too much. Because there are people on this earth for whom every waking moment is an agony, either an emotional one or a physical one. And they would kill to have someone wish them joy on any given day, especially holidays. So, if I were you, I would invest firstly in gratitude because you have people wishing you joy even when you prefer they didn't, and in self-awareness, i.e., realize that the problem to some extent lies with you rather than the day upon which people are wishing you joy that you wish they didn't. Moving on.
There's always some regrettable truth in my self-deprecating jokes about being grateful I like cats. They may turn out to be my forever companions. I've actually Googled if I can qualify for spinster status. Having been married before, the answer is no, in case you're curious. There is always that nagging feeling that, holy shit, I already had my love, the one which ended in divorce? Was that all I get? Will I really be the lone senior citizen who spends her days puttering around in a house coat, reflecting on seasons past, while sipping on a spiked prune juice cocktail?
Only if you let yourself be that person. Again, I don't want to be dismissive of you or anything, but to some extent, that is up to you. And fuck you for insinuating that cats are somehow a consolation prize. Because if you know how to cat properly, cats can be a much more reliable source of affection than humans. Which probably says something about my cynical approach to human beings, but fuck you, I get to because cats are awesome. And I don't like the insinuation that they're some sort of consolation prize. Moving on.
Alright, I mean, the ideal. Oh, sorry. Have you ever tangibly felt a black cloud? Because I'm pretty sure I have, and that was it. I mean, the ideal situation for a partnerless future would be that of the Golden Girls, but let's face it, the odds for that are squarely stacked against me. It's real and it's scary, and to those who cannot relate, it should not be callously dismissed. So just take your stuffed animal and your shiny heart-shaped button and truffle shuffle your glad ass out of here.
Okay, and here again is going to be a lesson on this thing we call agency. Because if you want the Golden Girls future rather than the lonely cat lady future, exercise some agency and get yourself or advertise yourself some new roommates. If you want to find yourself a Dorothy and a Blanche, go ahead and find yourself a Dorothy and a Blanche. Like whether you live alone in your old age or live with other aging women is entirely, at least largely, in your control. I.e., there are things you can do to make the Golden Girls future more likely and the spinster cat lady scenario less likely. There are plenty of older women who would rather have roommates in their old age than wind up in nursing homes. I would advise you to perhaps avail yourself of them, especially if you, in your own revealed preference, admit that you want a future that's closer to Golden Girls than it is to Cat Lady from The Simpsons. If you want that future, then you must align your actions or plans with the course of action that's likely to lead you closer to that future than to the other one. And it is entirely within your power to do so. Advertise for roommates or something. Or, hell, maybe you can find a similar dynamic with some people in a nursing home. Who knows? But these options are available to you. You only have to seize them. It really sounds like you're fighting with your own neuroses here and somehow managing to wind up the blame on Valentine's Day instead of yourself. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. Aside from the obvious reasons to loathe this commercially gluttonous Hallmark holiday, there are deeper reasons for me which makes this day more battle than benefit. When you grow older and are watching your parents age with you, it becomes increasingly spirit-gnawing that one day, long before your own death, you will be coping with theirs. For instance, my dad's health is not the best right now. He has sent me a single rose for Valentine's Day since I was 5 years old. Will today's rose be the last one?
Again, I have sympathies with this perspective. I too have dealt with the ever recursive anxiety spiral that is, you're going to die alone, no one will ever love you, you'll never make any meaningful impact on the world, over and over and over again. But, as per, living the advice that I've been giving you this whole time, I try my best to acknowledge that those thoughts are my own problem. It's up to me whether I give in to those thoughts or not. Or whether I choose to ride out the wave until those thoughts shut the fuck up again for a while, and so on. And again, I will remind you, if you want a Golden Girls future as opposed to a crazy cat lady future, then take the mechanical steps to get your future, or your possible future, closer to the Golden Girls and less close to the crazy cat lady approach. because I can tell you that this blaming holidays for your own personal problems mentality is a lot closer to the idea of a schizophrenic old cat lady who forgot that she has agency in her life than it is to something I would expect from Dorothy, Blanche, or Rose. I know a lot about the Golden Girls because it's my great grandma's favorite show. Shut up. And yes, I'm also gay, so I get to. Derp.
Okay. Passing of loved ones is devastating. That I'm well aware of. Passing of loved ones is devastating enough, but even more so when you're doing it alone. Unfortunately, days like today bring all of that fear and premature anguish into the forefront. When the time comes, will I have a significant other's hand to hold at the funeral? Will I be discussed with hushed whispers about how sad it is I've just lost my parents and am still by myself, albeit limited? There are those of us who are not only devoid of a partner, but also siblings and or children. It's just us and the stars in the sky, shining brightly until we burn out into a spiritual shimmer, unceremoniously and without legacy. Dramatic, yes. Authentic, also yes.
Some of this is up to you. If you want a significant other or roommates, find them. If you want meaningful connections with people that will endure after your parents die, you must make some effort to make them. And one of the things that is an obstacle to your ability to do this is it would be beneficial to you to stop blaming Valentine's Day for this feeling and do something with the motivations that this feeling is causing. I understand the existential no one will ever love you and you're going to die alone impulse. But here's again, another trite but true statement. Everyone has to die sooner or later, but we don't have to die alone. Doesn't mean you have to have a significant other or family or whatever. You can choose with whom you associate. You can go the roommate route and try to live your best, Golden Girls fanfic. But whatever you choose to do, they will be your choices that are at play here. And if nothing else, trying to, reshape the shadows of the future, Scrooge style, will at least give you something to keep striving for in your old age. If you try to live every day thinking, okay, how am I going to get closer to my ideal future today than I was yesterday, that will at least give you motivation right up until, that last spark dies. And you can at least say you didn't go, gentle or depressed or miserable into that good night. Kick and scream and rant and rave at every interval until your last breath. If nothing else, you can at least look forward to that. Don't let the world inflict its, nihilism upon you, and remind yourself that whatsoever your life looks like, it will be up to you as a result thereof. Moving on.
Alright. Valentine's Day is about love, whether we have it, miss it, want it, or hate it. Love is the one thing we all have in common on this day, and with love comes empathy. Keep that in mind when you witness someone struggling through this day, because not all of us are just being martyrs. It is true that any day can be a bad one, but it's a very limited amount of days which are so emphasized. These days are annual reminders of our romantic statuses, a cornucopia of feelings, both good and bad. Put your assumptions and judgments aside and show some compassion for those who'd like to send Cupid a glitter bomb in the mail to thank him for, well, nothing. And before you get too arrogant about it, always remember you're not invincible. Tragedy does not discriminate.
Okay, and now, please join me as I play the Uno reverse card. You are admonishing the people who do have someone, or at least wish for someone, on Valentine's Day to have more empathy for those that are miserable. All the while, your opening gambit was take your desire to spread joy with other people and shove it up your ass because I don't want your joy. And you didn't even realize how ridiculous and entitled that was to even think in the first place. You literally called for everyone else to empathize with you while telling everyone else that their perspective can go suck an egg, basically. And that would, from what little I know of, conjugating logical premises here, that would mean to me that you are not willing to extend empathy to anyone else, but you will grandiosely insist that everyone else has empathy for you. This is one of those things I was saying earlier about the unilateral direction of wishful thinking oriented relationships that aren't transactional. For certain people to be given things unconditionally, other people have to give things unconditionally and not receive anything in turn. And you appear to be, with no self-awareness whatsoever to speak of, saying, I want empathy for everyone from everyone else, but I will give none in return because fuck you. And I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that kind of narcissistic entitlement, or in this case, probably borderline personality disorder related entitlement, might be one of the reasons you're miserable and alone. Because if you expect things to be given to you wholesale and never give anything in return, then you are what we in the industry call a shitty human being. Moving on.
Alright. This year you may be gorging yourself on the Feast of Love, but next year you might be me. Hopefully I will be you one day if I am. I will always keep fresh the feeling of today as I am experiencing it right now. I will enjoy my roses, smell their fragrance, kiss their center, and dance through their aura with dreamy delight. But I'll never forget about those who were sent only the thorns.
Okay, and again, I am very close to where you're at with this. I am very prone to the I'm going to die alone and no one will ever love me death spiral. But here's the difference between me and you. One, I am, in the positive sense, transactional, which means if I want empathy from other people, then I've got to give a little to get a little. And I would not unilaterally desire a system where everyone got on their knees and worshipped me and didn't expect me to worship them in turn. You, however, have demonstrated a sincere and extremely narcissistic lack of self-awareness, and you've done so in the name of the call for empathy. Specifically, the call for empathy of you, and the call that no one should expect empathy from you. Because as you opened your article with, those people can take their jolly red hearts and shove them. Which, again, means that you want everyone else's empathy, but you can't be arsed or don't want the obligation of giving empathy in turn. Which is a shitty way of functioning, which might have been at least some of what landed you in this situation to begin with. The entitled narcissism is not your friend, is what I'm saying. Moving on.
Right. Give me one sec. So, like I said, we are going to be skipping over the last article we had, just so we can get out of here on a timely manner.
Mm-hmm.
I had actually, okay, so little fun fact. I had actually just suggested this idea yesterday because it just randomly popped into my head.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly surprised me that we had never actually covered this before.
It is a bit surprising that this has never come up.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to look for an image that we have because, again, like I said, it just came to me like last night, and therefore I didn't really have time to think or like images wise to look for each pick. So we're just going to kind of go with a
Hmm. And
without.
for me, the rough thing with this particular list is that there are so many love songs that I like because yes, being the fabulous person that I am, I a lot of my emotions are frequently set to music.
I,
So
hey Don, I didn't
mhm.
mention I didn't mention what the list were yet.
Ah,
I was building
shit.
up to it.
Womp, 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 womp. That's my
Yeah,
bad.
so our top 5 love songs.
Hmm.
I actually came up with mine fairly quickly, just because like there are very select type of songs that I listen to in terms of like love songs. Uh,
I had a whole nother list originally, and then I changed my mind at the last second.
okay,
Be- because of the aforementioned I like too many love songs, so I had to I I essentially went with the most like technically proficient love songs on my list because if I didn't add some extraneous criteria to this, it would be more like a top 20 or a top 100.
yeah, fair enough. All right, heads or tails.
Heads.
All right, you go first.
Okay, let me double check my list because I don't at the moment have the capacity to remember it.
Uh, all right, right. This phone can't. Right. StreamYard can't. Okay. You know what? I'm gonna do him a favor. Just write it in our private chat. I probably should have done that earlier. Now that I think about it.
Okay, sorry. StreamYard decided to kick me out when I tried to minimize the
I,
window.
I forgot about that. I'm actually gonna be. I'll write your list in the private chat so you have that.
Right.
All right. But you're number 5.
My number 5 is probably the most basic bitch of the songs I have on this list. Um, which is "Someone's Heartbreak" by Hunter Hayes. And yes, it is a country song. You guys have to remember that I
You're
was
East
born and
Coast.
raised in a very 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 rural part of Pennsylvania, and so country was the default music genre for a very very long time. But yeah, someone's heartbreak by Hunter Hayes is my number 5, just because it really captures the person who just wants to feel love and isn't particularly picky about how they get there at this point, and is willing to even open themselves up to being someone's heartbreak rather than continuing to be alone.
All right.
Your number 5?
Give me 1 sec. Okay. There you go. I got the 4-1 there for you in the private
Yep.
chat.
Yep.
All right. Oh. My number 5 is well, it's Can't Help Falling in Love, but the specific one, because there are a few different versions of it, is from Haley Reinhart. The original one, I believe, and anyone who knows music more than I do, please correct me if I'm wrong. The original one was by Elvis Presley.
Yes.
Um, I don't know why. It's just like that song. It just feels again. I'm it just feels very like it's how I have always wanted to like tell someone how I feel about them.
Mm.
And it just kind of resonates with me in a way that I don't know, makes me like every time I listen to it, I just imagine me and my significant other just slow dancing with like rose petals or cherry blossoms dancing around us.
Hmm.
I don't know, cheesy like that, I guess.
I mean, this is the top 5 love songs list, so
All right,
it's definitely a list where we're probably going to end up more inclined to be sappy.
right, okay. You're number 4.
My number 4 is "Glory of Love" by Peter Cetera. Um,
I'll be honest, I've never heard most of these songs on your list.
yeah, a lot of my choices were old school. Sue me.
I mean, I've heard your number 3. I just, you know, please continue. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
But "Glory of Love" by Peter Cetera is it very much captures almost the fairy tale aspects of love and the idea that love is such a powerful force that it can even grant immortality. I mean, one of the lines in the song is literally, "We'll live forever knowing together that we did it all for the glory of love." Hence the title. Um, and I'm gonna be honest here. This is the song that if I got a boyfriend inclined to sing to me, this is the song I would want him to sing as he like proposed to me or something.
This guy is so gay.
Again, is this your first day? Have you been helped, or did you recently fall off the back of turnip truck? This is not. It is one of those things that is known, Khaleesi. God damn it. You're number 4.
It is. Well, I've used this for a couple of our February month's intros. Counting Crows, "Accidentally in Love," which was the opening song for Shrek 2, which is where I originally heard it growing up.
I often forget how young you are.
I never forget how old you are.
Yes, thank you, and I'm sure that will get a fresh bout of dying alone thoughts in my head later. But that's later. Moving on.
You know I love you, right? Like my
Yeah.
best friend.
Yes, I know. And I appreciate it. That doesn't stop my anxiety from being a dick.
All right.
I appreciate the sentiment though.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. So it's like one of the. I'm gonna be honest. I think it was kind of one of the first love songs I ever listened to. Um. And I just think I don't know. I just get the vibe of like it's stupid, but I just imagine my significant other and I just listen to this song and we're dancing, through like the city.
So somehow I expect all 10 of these to be on our respective like wedding reception dance mixes. Like the DJ is gonna have all 5 of these queued up for our respective weddings, probably.
God damn it, Dragon Turtle.
And yes, DT, it's not that I'm embarrassed to like a country song. It's just I never really fit in the very rural community that I'm a part of, and I still don't really fit into the very rural community I'm a part of. So it's not so much that I'm ashamed of liking a country song, it's that it chafes with a lot of my personal memories of really not fitting in with the, let's be real here, the northern equivalent of Hicks that I grew up with. But we're at my number 3, I do believe.
No, wait. Did you say number 4? Yeah. No.
Uh,
Okay. You did. Yeah.
yeah,
You did. Okay.
number 4 is Glory of Love. Number 3 is the one we're doing now, which is the top of the World by the Carpenters. Where I first heard this was actually the quite actually terrible comedic version of Dark Shadows movie that Tim Burton made. Um, but the reason it's on this list is because it perfectly encapsulates the joyous high of love, I guess is the best way of putting it. I.e., being in love with someone worthy can literally make you feel as though you're on the top of the world. Given that my romantic desires run in kind of a Gary Stu direction, it's also probable that whoever I wind up bonded to will literally put me on the top of the world metaphorically, in the status hierarchy thing. But we will cross that rainbow bridge when we come to it, I suppose.
Yeah. Um. So what you mentioned earlier about the wedding reception thing, I could honestly see my number 3 being like the opening to all of it.
Hmm.
Uh, it is "I'm a Believer" by Smash Mouth, and yes, another Shrek reference.
Yeah, I pegged that one as soon as I saw it on your list. It was like, okay, yep, that's where he got it from.
Yeah.
I think that's where pretty much every millennial or Zoomer heard that song from. It's kind of like the song Hallelujah is where everyone in our age bracket heard that is in the mopey second act breakup part of Shrek.
Yeah.
Anyway, your description as to why it made your list.
Well, again, it was like one of the first love songs I ever heard growing up. But also I think it just kind of describes how I would kind of feel, especially now as I've gotten older, how I would feel if I found that one. You know,
Hmm.
I'm not saying I'm a bitter cynic because I mean I'm me, but love has not right now. Love has not really been a priority for me.
You're in the headspace where it seemed impossible, hence the association with the song.
Not so much impossible. It's just like I've kind of accepted that. I'm gonna be honest. I've just accepted that if destiny or the universe wants me to find love, I'm not gonna try and force it. I'm just gonna let it happen whenever it happens.
And I will of course here reference that I could in theory start doing love spells for you. I'd honestly actually be more comfortable doing a love spell for someone else than I would for me, because I'm paranoid about my standards backfiring on me, honestly. Somehow. That and the fact that the entity that I would most likely turn to for my personal love spell would be the demon Elagos.
Right. Yeah. All right. I think that's it actually for I'm a Believer. You want to go with your number two?
Yep. My number two is Earth Angel by the Penguins, and I think I'm again kind of like everyone else here because the first place I heard this song was in Back to the Future. It's the '50s song that gets sung right before Marty takes over the bandstand and sings Johnny Be Good. But I think this song is most likely the song that I would sing to my future significant other. If Glory of Love is the song that he would sing to me that would turn probably into a duet by the end, this is the song that I would sing to him that would probably also turn into a duet by the end. Again, in a lot of my fantasies, life is a musical because I am just that gay. As Brainstormer once put it, I am that bitch.
You really took that to heart, didn't you?
Yes,
Yeah.
because it is reflective and accurate. You're number two, sir.
Um. Ain't No Mountain High Enough by Tammy Terrell. Um. See, this is the weird part. I don't like. It just feels like I've known this song my entire life. I don't like have a specific moment where I remember hearing it for the first time.
Mm.
But it is just for one thing, it's just an incredibly catchy song, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, it describes effectively like the kind of relationship I would want to have with a significant other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no matter what, I'm always going to be there for them.
The immovable rock of loyalty, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and again, the same vice versa with them for me and stuff. It's just, but again, it's also like it's a nice song you can dance to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it for my number two.
Mm-hmm.
All right, number one.
My number one is Bette Midler's The Rose, despite the winter slander that might be in it. This song does, and I will disavow it for this reason and this reason alone. This song does slander winter a little bit. But that being said, when I'm in a depressive, mopey death spiral, this is one of those songs that motivates me to keep believing that somewhere out there is someone worthy of love and that I won't have to convince myself to love by sheer force of will. Because this is my problem. When I start dating someone new or I start interacting with someone new on a romantic level, I try my damnedest to kind of force myself to love them, and then I realize I did that, and then it ends up basically breaking any emotional connection from me. Um, when I realize that, because on the one hand, my rationale for doing it when I'm doing it is because my standards are too high and maybe I should just buckle under the pressure and settle for something more realistic. And then the reason why I often, you know, um, why I often end up talking myself back out again is after the first 2 weeks of the relationship, I end up realizing how deeply unhappy with the arrangement I am. And then the cycle starts all over again. But this is the song that when I need to, cry, repeated and soap opera-esque tears, this is the song that winds up playing again and and I will specify this though, I am disavowing the portion of this song that is anti-winter slander.
Right.
But that aside, it's my number one in terms of when I'm feeling emotionally vulnerable. This is the song that I end up leaning towards probably the most. We could honestly do a sequel of this next week, because I'm sure I could easily find another 5. I don't know if Brainstormer could, though.
I'd have to do some looking up and remembering of some stuff, but it's not impossible. My number one is Book of Love by Peter Gabriel. So I remember seeing this in the finale, season 8 finale, which actually is, if you ask any fans of the Scrubs show, is the true finale of the show.
Mm-hmm. I have heard that, despite not ever watching a single episode of Scrubs. Funny.
Yeah, season 9 was not great. But season 8, the finale played the song Book of Love by Peter Gabriel, and it was just it's, out of all of them, it's the most slow of the songs on my list. But it just feels like the kind of song, speaks to like the old soul part of me, because it's basically just talking about like just how like how to put it in the words here. It just feels like that kind of song that you slow dance to as you're like holding your partner close to you.
And again, the aforementioned, we're probably gonna wind up each putting these songs on our wedding reception DJ reel.
Yeah.
And we'll probably get extremely drunk and laugh about it together, because I assume we're both gonna wind up invited to each other's weddings.
I mean, I would hope I'd be best man, but
you probably will be.
Shit, that would mean I'm in charge of the bachelor party. God damn it.
Yes. He just now realized he was signing up for responsibility accordingly with that. And by the way, one of the many reasons why you would be my best man and not my friend Nick, who is the only other candidate at the moment for best man status, is because my friend Nick is that friend who is the chaos-oriented anarchist and the hedonist. So I wouldn't put him in charge of the bachelor party just for the sake of, I don't know if I could trust him to, get me to the wedding the following day.
Oh, a hangover situation?
Yeah. He would be the kind of person who would deliberately set up a hangover style situation on purpose to get me to live a little. Because you know the thing you and I do where you kind of keep me on a moral leash?
Yeah.
I kind of do that for Nick. And that's an interesting sort of parallel between our respective friendship relationships. And as a result, while I love Nick to death and I've known him for longer than I was in high school, I wouldn't put him in charge of anything that required any sort of responsibility, on the basis that he would find a way to crank up the anarchy, and I don't need that in my life. Anyway.
Right. Yeah, again, like Book of Love, like my final thoughts on it is just, it's like one of those songs that you slow dance to while you're holding your partner close, and just all the memories of your entire relationship, good, bad, mostly good, I would assume, just rush back to you. And you just realize in that moment, you found your soulmate.
And hopefully we will both be there someday.
God, that was sappy as fuck what I just said.
It was. It definitely was. But as I mentioned earlier, in a list like this is sort of inevitable. Given how closely tied love and music are and have always been, it's kind of hard not to talk about your favorite love songs without touching upon either very particular memories or very particular fantasies that you have in relation to love. And so sappiness was inevitable. There will be potential tears beyond this point, is the warning we probably should have given at the top.
All right. All right. Yeah, so with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, avideze, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Shalom, we're both tired and need to go to sleep. And with respect, fuck off.